Have you always been the type of person that has to run to the refrigerator every couple of hours, or maybe even as a child, you could never play outside for very long because you always felt hungry? And now those very same feelings have followed you into adulthood. Well, let me tell you, if that's the case, then you definitely have a blood sugar problem, and you most likely are going to need to address it now, or it's only going to get worse. Because what is the possible alternative if you don't? Or let's say if you as health coaches don't help clients in potentially doing so. Well, then possibly I would say the best case scenario is having them, your clients, yourself, living a life of needing to eat every 2 hours, or else getting that feeling of being hangry, or even suffering from that increasing belly fat year after year. But in the worst case scenario, you're going to end up having your doctor slap you with the "you got diabetes" diagnosis. Or maybe you're already taking a diabetic drug like metformin, or even worse, possibly on the doorstep to having to take insulin shots. Or maybe you as coaches have clients that are doing so, or maybe it's a family member who's in one of those situations. Well, if you fall into any of those categories, or you know someone that does, then you might want to pay some special close attention for the next few minutes, as I want to make sure that everyone can all better catch and solve a problem like that, or like what I'm describing, before it ever becomes a problem in the first place. Because I'll tell you, a blood sugar dysregulation problem could have potentially been brewing in you or in someone else for 20 years or more. But even if that is the case, then a person can still make some giant strides in terms of improving things in as little as 3 months if they know what to look for and what actions to take, and also what blood panels to order, so a potential problem can be caught early on. But real quick, before I get into the nitty-gritty details, if you guys listening to this are super interested in any of the content that's being delivered through any of these videos, I know this is the first couple, and if you'd like to learn more like health and nutrition tools from coaches and teachers who are still in the field getting their hands dirty, then please just check out the links below. And remember, one more thing, this month's videos are primarily centered around blood sugar dysregulation and insulin resistance. And if you want to learn more about this topic, then make sure to become part of the lab at the Nutritional Coaching Institute, as that is what this whole month's topics are all going to be centered around. Okay, jumping back. Now, if you go and you take some of the same information that I'm talking about, or you take the same type of diabetes prevention approach to most doctors and ask them, what is the best way to prevent a blood sugar dysregulation problem from ever happening? Well, all I gotta say is be prepared to be super disappointed in the answer, unless you are ultimately just looking for a drug, because that's most likely the extent of what you're gonna get. Now, here's the thing when it comes to doctors helping patients manage or even prevent any of their blood sugar issues, at least in the conventional medical model, and even in some integrative medicine circles, it's most of the time they're looking for disease instead of disease prevention. And many of the current approaches that they use to determine if someone does have a blood sugar imbalance or not, I would say definitely need some updating. And I also think that some of those very same doctors might also need a little bit more educating at times as well. Now, I'm not saying all of them, but there are definitely some of them out there that do. And that is where you guys, ladies, as health coaches can come into the equation big time. Now, diabetes is obviously the endpoint that everyone wants to avoid. But like I said earlier, diabetes does not develop overnight, as it's most likely been brewing or developing for decades. And if you are someone that knows that they don't do well if they don't eat every 2 to 3 hours, or if your doctor has only ever measured your fasting blood glucose and nothing else, then you could possibly have a deeper rooted problem that's going unnoticed. As all of you guys, I keep saying guys, but I mean guys and ladies, you should know that people can have a blood sugar level that gets measured in the 90s, okay, and still have full-blown diabetes and not even know it. Now, technically, if a fasting blood glucose in a person is over 125 on 3 separate occasions, then that person is given the D diagnosis for diabetes. But how many years did that same person potentially have insulin resistance? Or how long have they possibly been in a pre-diabetic state and didn't even know it? Now, there are actually 3 super important markers that should always be checked if blood sugar dysregulation or if a blood sugar dysregulation problem is ever suspected, that go outside of just a fasting blood sugar, a hemoglobin A1C, and a fasting insulin marker that will much more accurately show if a person is having those blood sugar highs and lows or not. And those 3 markers are called C-peptide, fructosamine and leptin. Now, C-peptide is a molecule that is released at the same time that insulin is, meaning that for each molecule of insulin that gets produced, there's also a molecule of C-peptide that gets released. However, C-peptide will not directly influence blood sugar all on its own. But it is a very accurate and useful marker of insulin production because C-peptide, it hangs around in the blood for a much longer period of time than insulin does. So its reading shows how much insulin has been produced over about a 30-day period compared to just a snapshot of how much insulin is in the blood at any one specific time, like a fasting insulin marker would report. Now, the normal range is within 0.5 to 2.0 nanograms per milliliter. And any number that comes back higher than that 2.0, then that will show that there's been some large fluctuating insulin numbers and or that high insulin production in a person has been taking place. Now, fructosamine, okay, is number 2. That's another marker that can be used in cases where a person's hemoglobin A1C marker, which measures a person's blood sugar over a 90-day period, cannot be used, as fructosamine is more of a shorter-term blood sugar monitoring tool that reflects a person's glucose levels over the past 2 to 3 weeks. Now, for non-diabetics, the normal range is 175 to 280 micromoles per liter. And for each 75 micromoles, a change in that fructosamine reading, that is going to equal or equate to a change of approximately 60 milligrams per deciliter in a person's fasting blood sugar reading, or a 2% change in a person's hemoglobin A1C marker. So that can be also a great tool to use for comparison when not wanting to wait a full 90 days for another hemoglobin A1C reading. Now, leptin is third, and that's the next marker. And the reason being for leptin being included in this list is that leptin and insulin directly regulate each other, meaning that leptin inhibits insulin, and the reverse of insulin is that insulin stimulates leptin synthesis and secretion. So when leptin increases, it naturally increases insulin sensitivity as well. And it does so by reducing body fat as well as the toxicity that the body fat creates, but also through some additional outside means. However, when a person has what's called leptin resistance, or when their leptin secretion gets too high, that means that a person pretty much has a lot of fat on their body. But the brain is still registering that the body does not have enough fat, of which then causes the brain to think that the body is starved, even though the person could technically be obese and have tons of body fat. That is why many have called obesity the starvation of the brain. Now, if leptin creeps above 15, just think 15, then a person's body is beginning to show a problem, or that the beginnings of leptin resistance and insulin resistance, for that matter, could be forming. And a leptin reading that comes back over 25, well, that's definitely a person that's fighting with leptin resistance. Now, 9 times out of 10 in Western medicine, most doctors will not measure even one of those markers, even after a person is technically diagnosed as pre-diabetic or even as diabetic. But I bet you can be rest assured that a person will receive a medication as a crappy consolation prize if they get that D diagnosis. Okay, so if you really drill down and look at the people who have blood sugar dysregulation issues, you will probably see that there has most likely been insulin resistance or pre-insulin resistance that's been taking place or brewing behind the scenes for possibly 10 or even 20 years. And both of those areas are problems that if they're caught early on, they can be fixed through diet and lifestyle. And we as health coaches should be encouraging our clients to have the proper testing performed early on. Okay, and at a bare minimum, okay, I would say when a person's blood sugar level ever starts to get near that 100 mark, this is a fasting glucose, then that should serve as a definite smack in the face that a person needs to wake up. But even before that point ever comes, a person should also be looking at testing their hemoglobin A1C, their C-peptide, their fructosamine, and their leptin levels, as all of those markers are just tools that we should be educating our clients on so that they can all be used more and more, and then hopefully soon they can become the standard of care that will only help prevent the development of prediabetes and insulin resistance from ever taking place. So everyone out there, please just store those 4 important markers in your long-term memory. And for any of all your, let's just say any of your clients who might have blood sugar issues brewing, or for those people that can't go more than a few hours without getting hungry if they're not eating, or getting that hangry feeling. Okay guys, so one last time, if you found any of this information useful, then please give us a like and possibly a comment, and also check out the links below and learn about how to possibly become part of the NCI and WellFits family. And with that, guys, I have nothing else to say. Or let's say guys and ladies. I will see everyone else soon on the next video. I hope you like this. But until then, have a good one. Travis James Zipper, signing off.